See, and Ren loves it too, so I hope they come by. All right, welcome everyone. Oop, I'm gonna adjust that to Lunch Zone. I threw together a cute little overlay in about 10 minutes, so it's probably not all that good. But my name is David. I'm a PhD student here at UW Milwaukee, and I'm joined by two lovely people today.
My name is Janelle. I'm a second year PhD, and this is my new favorite game. What's good?
My
Love
name
it.
is Morgan. I am a cultural anthropology master student at UWM, and it's a lot of hype. That's what I got.
I just took the basket out of the frame, my laundry basket. Janelle, can you read our land acknowledgement?
Absolutely. So, we acknowledge that in Milwaukee, we live and work on traditional Potawatomi, Ho-Chunk, and Menominee homelands along the southwest shores of Michigami, part of North America's largest system of freshwater lakes, where the Milwaukee, Menominee, and Kinnickinnic rivers meet, and the people of Wisconsin's sovereign Anishinaabe, Ho-Chunk, Menominee, Oneida, and Mohican nations remain present.
Lovely. Thank you so much for doing that. I'm just gonna share with some people that I'm streaming right now, and
Yay.
then we'll get started. Um, so Janelle, what is your experience playing Octopath Traveler?
Oh my God, I'm so happy you asked. It's staying up late at night when I should be asleep, which is the only time that I can devote any actual gameplay to this. For like an hour or two every night for like the past week and a half. Um, this game is fantastic, man. It's really wonderful. It's what you're about to do where you choose who you want to start with. Um, I spent a lot of time on this screen. You don't have to do that. I'm a crazy person, but I spent a lot of time on here just reading the map, getting familiar with the space, reading these different characters and stuff. And it's such a rich story. This is really just the literal tip of the iceberg. And I haven't gotten very far either. I'll say I started with Hanit up in the north with I mean, she's got a cat. That's
I
not super surprising.
I was gonna choose her too because she's got a bow and arrow, and I like
I
that.
always go. I always go for bow mains. I don't
Yeah,
know why.
she's super rad. And Loki, if you do pick her, um, she's pretty tough. I mean, like she'll cream pretty much anybody, and she'll set you up. So far, in my experience, anyway, she'll set you up to take on enemies in the future far more easily, I think, than some of the other ones. Like I
Mm.
suspect if I had started with the Scholar, I don't remember what his name is. I haven't picked him up yet. He's like up north somewhere. But if
Yeah,
you start with the
Cyrus.
Scholar, I'm gonna guess that he's not gonna fight as well as she is.
Yeah, I kind of want to start with him because I like being able to like his talent is study foe, which I kind of like.
Mhm.
So I kind of want to start with him. Also, we are
I
scholars.
I love it. We are scholars and we play, and
We seriously play.
we seriously play. I
Yep.
watched like the beginning of this guy's story because I picked him and then my game didn't save correctly,
Mm.
Oops.
so I did not pick him again. Just
Let's
sounded
do it.
word it was cursed.
I'm gonna choose him, and then for the next character, I'll probably choose somebody who's a better
And
fighter.
so it was that
Mm-hmm.
Amsterdam was founded some 2 centuries
Hello,
ago.
everybody.
Amsterdam. Oh,
Oh
hello.
hi,
Hello, hello.
how are you?
I'm good. I'm sorry I'm a little
Their
late.
city-state
No
was
Oh no,
worries.
you're
long
good.
We were just getting started anyway. We're playing Octopath Traveler today, which is a
Okay.
JRPG from
was another
that's from Square,
century
right?
of history as
Yep.
long
Is it
Yeah, it is.
made by Square or published by Square?
came to a
Yes,
tragic
it was
ruin.
both actually.
Oh, okay. That answers the question because there's some things that are like that Square Enix publishes that are not
Mm-hmm.
Who can tell me its name?
themselves. They're both a publisher and a
How about
developer,
you,
so that's why I always ask.
Therese?
Yeah, they did it in collaboration with, I want to say, Acquire.
I think it was.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Not familiar
so
with
the overall conceit of the game is that there are 8 characters that eventually you go down each of their paths. Right? Janelle, you can step in if I say anything wrong. And so it's like, is it where once you play down one character's path, you keep them in your party forever? Or is it like they each have like parallel stories going on?
That's a really good question. So the way that it works, or at least my impression of it so far, I've played, I think,
Yes.
yeah. So I've gotten through 3 characters' first stories. The way that it works is that you've chosen Cyrus now, so he'll have some kind of starting narrative that we're watching here. You'll play through his first chapter, and once you've done that, you'll sort of open up the world a little bit more, and you can start to travel. Once you do that, you have free reign to go anywhere in the world that you would like, as long as you walk there. There's no fast traveling. So you have to walk there, so you can choose sort of who you're going to run into next, since, as we saw earlier, there are like pings on the map where everybody is. So you'll run into these people, and they work at first, just like all the other NPCs. You talk to them, but once you talk to these characters, they have like a little green speech bubble instead of everybody else's white speech bubble. Once you talk to them, you're given the prompt of, do you want to bring this person along with your journey? And you're given a brief warning that says, if you do this, certain areas will be inaccessible to you until you complete that character's first story. So it creates a sort of parallel narrative in that you can control the chronology depending on who you choose to start with and then whose journey you choose to follow up with. Because, for example, I decided to start with Honey in the North, and I'm working my way as I am sort of writing a narrative in my head of she probably wouldn't pick up this person because their quest doesn't really line up with what she's trying to do right now. So skip them, go on to someone else, and sort of travel with the sort of intention of going to chapter 2. Because as soon as you finish chapter 1 for a character, chapter 2 pops up somewhere else. So you're given these constant goals, but you can choose to sort of change your path, so to speak, based on who you choose to travel with at certain times.
Gotcha. I might have misheard you, but did you say like you felt like, oh, Hanit wouldn't want to pair up with this character, so I'm gonna choose someone else? Like, is that something
Yeah.
you keep in mind as you decide like this is the next story I'm gonna choose?
Sort of, yeah. So there's a character that Ren played when they played this game a while ago, Therion. He's a thief, right? So Hanit's story is basically like her comrade, her like mentor of like a hunter from a very traditional group that, they've been the most famous, most adept hunters in the world forever, and she's like one of the last hunters from their village. Her mentor goes missing on a hunt, so she's going to trek across the world to go find him. So then, as I'm traveling, I come across Therion, who's a thief, and his quest is he wants to break into this palace. Doesn't seem as maybe top priority because there's a certain sense of urgency in Hanit's story where it's like there seems to be a sense that time is running out, you gotta hurry. So I'm sort of running that narrative in my head as I go, but of course, you can read that entirely differently and write your own story. But yeah, I am kind of keeping that in mind.
It's interesting because it kind of, it's like, for lack of a better term, it's like a meta narrative that you yourself are kind of building. As you're saying, like, these are all the characters that are available to me, and here's how I see their stories maybe matching up or not, and like that's going to affect how I choose to go in this story.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did that with in Fire Emblem Three Houses. You can recruit people from other houses into your house. And in my second playthrough, I'm like, I am not going to pick up Felix or Sylvian because I do not want to mess with their story. They can do their Blue Lines, and I'm going to leave them be because I do not want to mess with that. Because I played through Blue Lines and I knew the ending of that. It's like, I don't want to break up the best friends. So it's like I'm making my own meta narrative of like I'm gonna leave you over there. I'm gonna take Ash because that makes sense. Like kind of making a story in and of itself of who would and wouldn't join my house realistically. So
See, and that's funny because the way I approached it is like I basically tried to recruit as many people as possible. and I'm not considering like the narratives that they are a part of. And I'm just like I just kind of want to unlock everything I can. So it's a different approach right to it, which is interesting.
Indeed.
yeah, definitely, and it's like you kind of making your own game, especially with like Fire Emblem, and you go like, well, I don't really want to, like, this person seems more closer to that guy, so I'm going to work harder to do that support rather than this support because that seems cooler or something, you know?
Yeah. In this game, are there supports where like characters interact with one another to like develop new skills, or I guess I don't know because you haven't played too long, Janelle.
From what I've seen, it's not so much of that. Well, there is, so in the battle sequences, you're working together. Your party, you can change your party pretty much anytime so long as you're not stuck in one of those sort of like closed narratives, like the first chapter, for example, where you have to finish those before you can do other things. If you're not doing that, then you have the power to change your party whenever. So in a sense, you do have that where you're learning skills together. You perform better in battle in larger groups, you earn more experience. The game has something that they distinguish as job points, which are how you get skills. What I've noticed, which makes sense, the bigger your party is, the more difficult the enemies you can handle, therefore you get more job points. So there is a sort of like sense that you're doing that, but it's not narrativized that I've seen so far. I would expect that with this story of convergence, there's going to be some kind of narrative where there's overlap and stuff, but I would guess that's going to happen in the later chapters, because right now it still feels like I'm working through disparate stories.
Yeah, that's something I've been thinking about recently because I've been looking into Persona 5, and there's not a mechanism like there's in Fire Emblem where you like develop friendships between characters. But you like develop, a friendship and you gain more skills when you as the avatar develop relationships,
Okay,
right?
yeah.
And Fire Emblem is one of, and maybe I'm just haven't played enough like RPG style games, but Fire Emblem is one of those few where it's like you every character gains more skills the more relationships they build. And the more you uncover their narratives through these relationships. And I wonder if there are other games that like marry that like narrative building with like skill building as well.
I wonder. I'd have to.
No.
I have a lot of friends who play like similar games to Fire Emblem, so I wonder if there is. Because it's a really great. It's a really it's kind of a really provocative way of doing it. Because Fire Emblem's all about being a team and being like centered around, or the later games, I will say. I don't know about the earlier games, but like Awakening in Three Houses and Birthright, they were all about like learn your team, build a team that you really like, work together. In Fire Emblem, you could like put two supports together, like two people together in one unit, so they could go around and attack each other with things, and it's an interesting mechanic to be like, oh well, this person has more support with that guy, so put those together and that kind of stuff. So
yeah, or like I want them to develop a relationship, so I'm gonna put these two characters together on the battlefield because that's how they build their relationships. And in Persona 5 Royal, they do add where like two characters develop like a special move, like a special finisher style move, but like there really isn't. But they're automatically unlocked depending on like the in-game day that you're in. Like you don't have to do anything with the two characters to get them to unlock this special skill. Whereas in something like Fire Emblem, you have to like deliberately put those characters together and have them in your party to unlock these narrative and gameplay benefits.
That's really cool. So how do you are you signaled to put characters together, like, by directive, or is that like a narrative suggestion where you sort of pick up that you should be doing that?
It's kind of in the tutorial.
Okay.
It's very much like, hey, this is a thing that you can do, and gives you certain bonuses, and bonuses are great. And also they get to do supports, and supports are cool too. And it's kind of it's tutorialized in a way where you don't have to do it, but the game like tells you like, hey, you can do this, so you're like, all right, I'll do that.
Right, okay.
Yeah, like in the tutorial, it'll say like moving people to, to spaces right next to each other. Sometimes they'll do a follow-up attack, and then it'll like force you to do that on the board. And then it'll say like, by doing that, you also build the relationship. And then like every time you attack an enemy next to another person, like a little heart appears over your head to signal that like your relationship has grown a tiny little bit.
Many thanks.
Someone has joined.
Yes, it is I. It is Ren.
Yay!
Our resident
We
Octopath
were gonna say you're our scholar. We chose Cyrus, and you're our Octopath scholar. So I'm glad you're able to make it.
God, my like profile description on Steam for the longest time has been my friends tell me I'm a discount version of Cyrus from Octopath Traveler, and that is entirely untrue until exactly this moment. Thank you for fulfilling the prophecy. A good choice, by the way. The best joke in the entire game is at the end of this section.
This chapter?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
I haven't picked them up yet.
We were chatting a bit, Ren, about like how narrative and gameplay like is married. I shouldn't say married. How they affect each other in a game like Fire Emblem versus a game like this. I chose Cyrus and how like people approach the game. So like Janelle mentioned that like when she chose her first character, she felt like what was her game name again? Hanit,
I think.
Yeah. And how like her mission didn't really gel as well with like the thief. So the next character she chose wasn't the character that was just nearby.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And for me it was like, oh, I saw Cyrus's abilities and I like the idea of like being able to understand your foes more, so I'm just going to choose him. So I'm more focused on the gameplay element, and Janelle's thinking more maybe about the narrative choices.
Well, if you went through, fans have referred to her as Haunted as well. I'm not sure which is correct. But if you went through that, then you know about the beautiful Old English that they...
Yes. Oh man, it's Inuyasha Old English. It makes like no sense.
It really doesn't. I don't
But
know
it's
what
hilarious. Like it's like hilariously immersive, and I think I've been like smash watching Inuyasha for like weeks now, so that's definitely part of it where I'm like, I just feel immersed in this. This is not surprising. But it is hilarious, and it does do something really interesting when you're playing that character and you leave that area and people stop talking like that. It is really interesting, and it does a sort of linguistic geography in this game that's pretty cool.
I just have to say, this argument that's happening right now is hitting too close to home. Because they're like, you cited an article that was wrong, and I'm like, oof.
Worst nightmare.
Yeah, the headmaster is like I don't know how they got, like, obviously there's some like mythos around what happens at the academy, and that's definitely like what is going on in this section of the game, but it does really feel like a surprisingly accurate conversation between administration and faculty.
And he's like, but knowledge is supposed to be public.
This is all hitting too close to home for me, guys.
Yes.
I'm out.
I'm out.
Knowledge is a metal or a precious stone, something to be appreciated by its rightful owner alone. Ugh.
Woo!
It knows.
It knows.
My sincere apologies.
Just a second. I just need to move this over.
Is there anything else you need of me?
That is all. You
Oh yeah, there's talk in the chat about like it's almost kind of like a pop-up book quality. I'm thinking about like looking at the bookshelves in the background. It has like a pop-up book quality to it. The background does, and the sprites.
Lighting.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, the lighting plays a big part of that because as the camera pans, the lighting panned with it in a really interesting way that you don't usually see. If I unless I remember that wrong, but you don't usually see a camera pan and the lighting is following the camera unless you're somebody who's shooting something on an iPhone. It's very unusual. So it brings out that three-dimensional, shadowy quality of like a pop-up book, I think.
Right, because it gives it the sort of impression of your eyes scanning a room, or in the case of a storybook, scanning the pages of a book. And when you make your way out of the interior spaces and into the more natural environments, the shadowing and the lighting do really good work in creating these hidden passageways toward like treasures and stuff, which are very familiar to storybooks and pop-up books in particular, where they have like hidden tabs that alter the space. It's so cool.
And it's kind of like an Easter egg in the book, like in a way, right? Or it allows, like, the lighting effect allows the book to maybe obscure certain small details that you might only see on a second or a third time around read, or if you really like deeply inspect it.
Oh wow. Yeah, look right here. I mean, you can see the focus. It's like that when there was that trend for that particular focal length trick that makes everything look like it's a diorama. I mean, that's kind of in play here. And the other thing I think about is the fact that, if cell shading, when that came into computer games, was a kind of reference to a kind of comic book aesthetic, that was across, one medium to another. This, of course, and it's not the first time, there's a bunch of examples of this, but this is a bit like that in the sense that it's the but within video game history, obviously taking this kind of aesthetic and then making use of it in new ways. That's really quite striking.
Can I help you?
And I understand that visually this shares some DNA with the Bravely Default series, but I understand this game is like the Bravely Default series smooths a lot of this out, and I don't know. I feel like the rough edges really work well for this game in a way that they wouldn't if this was like, more traditionally 3D modeled as far as the avatars go.
I always thought, I guess I haven't looked at the Bravely Default. I thought Bravely Default was much more of like a JRPG anime-esque, like hand-drawn sort of aesthetic. But
I might be thinking about the new Bravely Default as opposed to the old one.
That's true.
Because I knew the new one is like very 3D chibi stuff.
Yeah.
So I know this question has been asked, but is there a kind of consensus view on it, right? Like when people who are, I mean, certainly my age, definitely, but even your age, you see this kind of, for those of you who are roughly all much younger than me, when you see this kind of reuse of this aesthetic, there's that nostalgia factor, which is, influencing necessarily your engagement with it and how compelling you might find it to be. Is there any kind of consensus about whether that is the end of it, or whether there, for people who are, newer and younger, what is their response to this kind of thing? How much of it is fueled by nostalgia? Can we see past our own sort of fascination with that and assess its impact more broadly?
Something that we discussed yesterday during Multiplayer Mondays, we were talking about like archetypes within sci-fi and how like a lot of people attribute a lot of things to Star Trek, which in some ways like really popularized it, but also Star Trek is part of like this, huge network of like sci-fi texts, and how like I'm thinking there is that nostalgia factor, but I'm also thinking like the archetype of, or the archetypal like art styles of a lot of JRPGs. Like I think it's working with the art style of a lot of JRPGs, but it's kind of like remixing it in a new way. And I don't know what much else to say beyond that, but like the sprites give me a lot of like Chrono Trigger vibes to it. But I think it's like deliberately using that with this pop-up aesthetic to make a new. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And I guess I was asking whether someone like who is 16 or 14 who picks up this game would have the same reaction. But then I realized I want to correct myself because a lot of people who are that young, they've played a DS, and those kinds of systems have still been using this heavy pixelation even very recently, right? So it's not even as simple as sort of saying this is playing with the past, in some straightforward way.
And I definitely think there is, because like this is kind of the isometric top-down view is very reminiscent to still like Fire Emblem, like Awakening was very similar, like sprites and that kind of stuff, similar to this. I'm just trying to think of, but like the DS was very stylistically still pixelated and stuff, and that's partially limitations of the DS. But there were still DS games that were very, like Pokemon games like X and Y were very not pixelated anymore.
Yeah, and Kingdom Hearts
so, like,
358/2 tried to do like a full, what you could do with full 3D, and it really, that game is an aesthetic all its own.
And I feel like I have this kind of, like, I feel like there's this big kind of push, and in my in my graduating class, there's people who were like, I want to go back to like Final Fantasy, like the older Final Fantasy games, because they liked Octopath and they like Final Fantasy. And they're like, I know that there's games in the Final Fantasy history that I would like to go back to because it's older Final Fantasy is similar because Square Enix and all that kind of stuff. So they go back and emulate 16 bits and stuff. And I think that adds to maybe the nostalgia of it. Like even if they've never played it, it's still like, well, this is like the pixelated aesthetic nods back to a history that people are aware of and feel nostalgic for the history rather than actually like living through it.
We are like, by the way, just a quick interruption about the gameplay here, because it's something that the game doesn't really tell you right off the bat. I think we talked about this last time. The characters are separated into roguish and kind of I can't remember what the other type is called, but the paragons and the rogues essentially of the world, the paladins and the rogues. Cyrus is classed as a rogue. And scrutinize is the roguish way to get information, which means you have a % chance of succeeding or failing as opposed to it being flatly related to your level. So, to throw that out there about the first of all, apparently professors are rogues. And apparently,
the system, man.
Yes, it's true.
I think that's also kind of building on a different kind of nostalgia insofar as something like it's hard to separate stories like Indiana Jones from the idea of the roguish professor who's searching for the truth no matter what's getting in their way,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that kind of subversive quality of open inquiry in academia. Yeah,
Or like the researching scientist who experiments on himself.
Yeah.
That kind of archetype.
Which, I mean, this game owes itself a lot to nostalgia outside of just JRPGs. Therion's quest is go get the Dragon Balls.
No.
Oh yeah, but that's
Full stop.
Man, I should have picked him up. That's my mistake.
yeah.
And you gotta have crystals floating around, otherwise it's not a Final Fantasy game. So there's also that going on in the world.
Which means
So there's a lot of different little threads running through this game as far as who is going to connect with what parts of the nostalgia.
Mm-hmm.
If you never watched Dragon Ball or you're not into anime, you might look at Therion's story and go, oh, okay, well, I'm just going to go get these stones and they do a magic thing that I don't know about. That's just a fantasy trope, right? You wouldn't go to think, oh, I'm like the anime dude going to go get the MacGuffin.
Gotta get the MacGuffin.
Right. Standard magic quest. Go grab magic item.
well then.
Mm-hmm.
Seems like in most of mine, it's like, go get this book. Alright, that's fine. Like, I don't know what I want you to do.
So, Rent, maybe you can answer more of a question that we talked about earlier, which is that how much crossover is there really between the characters and their stories? Like, are there points where the characters are talking with each other and learning with one another, or is it more independent storytelling and you change your party?
this is one of the weaker points of this game, right? They build this incredibly interesting cast that's mostly built out of archetypes. Every character has something going on with them that isn't quite archetypal, but like, you know, all the characters are pretty much, you know, here's the professor, here's the roguish professor, here's the washed out paladin, here's the young merchant, you know, like you can use two words to describe everybody. And then the interactions that they have with each other are limited to the taverns, actually. When you go into a tavern in a town, two characters will sometimes talk to each other about what was going on. Or if a cutscene happens, sometimes two characters right afterward will talk back and forth about what just happened. And that's neat. The conversations are really funny, and they really do a really good job of building out the relationships. It's just they're very missable.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so really this is a game, this is 8 quests in parallel as opposed to one quest that is done by, you know, everybody involved.
That makes sense, especially since the way that they laid out the stories being like, I'm doing, like, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to do this. Like, each of them have their own goals in life.
Yeah, they're very independent characters for the most part, and like I said, I think that's kind of been a missed opportunity in the writing room. I understand why it didn't happen. I mean, this game is massive, and also, you know, really, they already quite large and long and complicated. But it would have been nice to see some of the some interactions between Therion and Alphen, or Cyrus and, you know, Hanet, or whatever else, happen in a storyline capacity. And you get that kind of at the end, insofar as several threads of their stories all come together to form a secret boss that you have to fight at the end of the game if you want to. You have to do all the side quests, and then it'll pop up, essentially.
Oh, okay, yeah, I was gonna ask, what all do I need to do to make that guy appear?
And he's hard as hell. Like, I know Ryan said this in the chat, but like, oh my god, what a thing they put at the end of this game. It's very well, I could analogize it, but that would ruin the surprise.
Okay.
It's also nostalgic, but only if you played a very specific game.
Okay, that's good. I'm very excited for the challenge. I will say, because part of the reason that I wanted to pick up this game is because I've heard about how difficult it is. So far, it has not really disappointed. I don't think I've gotten far enough for it to be like really, really, really hard yet. But yeah, exactly.
The end bosses are where you'll find it. So the way this game is structured, as far as maybe we can talk about nostalgia here too. You have jobs. You level up those jobs, and you can switch them out on any character. And the sprites will change based on what job you've assigned to that character. You get a secondary job and a primary job, right? So Cyrus can be a dancer and a scholar, which, like, don't we all want to be that? But, you know, and you'll get abilities from that. And you also have, like, passives that you build up and stack, and then you can put those passives on any character. So, like, you have to take points in Ulbricht's, I think it's the night job, if I remember correctly, to get limit break, for instance, for physical attacks. So, you know, suffice to say that there's, you know, this older system of how RPG roles work stacked into this game as well. And that means that there are secret jobs, and they're super powerful. But to get them, you have to beat literal gods.
Gotcha. So,
you know, or at least semi gods. I think one of them is technically a god, and the other ones are like just really, really, really fucking tough. And you know, you're gonna have to know the game in and out to do that. Can they be cheesed? Brilliant. Absolutely. But you have to know how to do that, and you have to have your characters leveled up enough to do it.
That's really exciting.
I died.
Oh.
Don't forget that you can ramp up your spells as well, by the way.
With the boost mode?
Yes.
Okay.
And, oh my god, the damage.
Yeah.
Meta magic, man.
Ah, hello, heart cell.
Oh, hi.
So this is a frustration of mine that we can get into. So does this game let you eventually see enemy like health bars? Is that something the
no.
game lets you do?
No.
Okay.
Nope.
So-
And it is frustrating. It's very frustrating.
Enemies have 3 states. It's like a D&D thing. They have the white state, the I'm a little green state, and the red state, and that just tells you how close to death they are. There's nothing else to say. It's very important for Haunted, especially since Haunted, who has some of the highest damage potential in the game, has to capture enemies.
Wait, she has what?
Do you not know about this? You can capture
No,
enemies
you just cut out
throw
for
them
me.
back out into
Oh, yeah.
combat. And so you can get like some dumb shit and then start just dropping bombs on people because
That's
it's so
fantastic.
powerful. She like secretly has like one of the she's a higher skill character in terms of like you have to like go, okay, I have to remember to capture this. It's not a lot of higher skill, but for somebody who's just going through the RPG and like pressing buttons, they aren't gonna get there.
Right.
But like because I didn't use her at all the first time I went through. Like I used her for like leg hold trap, but I didn't use her for like some of her other abilities.
Sure.
Actually, this is a great example right here. That enemy right there is at half health. When it turns green, that's half, from what I understand.
Okay.
Interesting.
Now
So,
it's critically
but then they regenerate. Is that right?
No, they do not regenerate. Certain enemies will heal themselves, but they do not regenerate.
Okay, I see.
Do you restore everything? No, you don't. So it was just that one. Okay. You don't restore your health.
Restored when you level up,
Oh, that's why. Got
And
it.
you
or
can
when
heal.
you rest at an inn.
Yeah. And I'm guessing
So-
that the SP heals when you rest at an inn as well.
Mhm.
Yes, and when you level up, and when you certain moves will also replace it, and certain items will also refill it.
Okay.
And SP, of course, for a magic character is a huge deal. You can also get armor that will help with that. Obviously, I mean, you know, like any other RPG. It is interesting to me that they went to a system like, you know, SP as opposed to MP. I mean, I find myself fascinated by the different like verbiages used to apply to whatever abilities you've got, right?
Are they skill points or are they magic points?
I think they're skill points
Okay.
in this game. I'm not 100% on that, but I've seen like some older games will use PP for power points,
Like Pokemon.
and it's like, why make the decision to use any one of those? Is always something that like sticks out in my mind.
Well, it's again, it's a trope of the JRPG genre, and so I feel like because HP and SP are so used in so many different games, even games like, you know, Kingdom Hearts, where it's MP rather than SP because it's, I don't know, something different. But Kingdom Hearts has also changed how magic works in all of its games, basically.
Yeah.
So I feel like the naming system behind it is meant to signal to the player that like this works differently from other styles of how you've encountered SP before. It's gonna be functionally different than SP in other games. I feel like is part of it.
Mm-hmm. And to fair to you know, with Kingdom Hearts, it could be magic with an E. You know, I mean,
Magic.
Magic.
you never know. Although I will say the Kingdom Hearts games always got me as a kid really mixed up because I was like, is that magic points or is that like my money points? Because they're both. How do I? But you know, this game is a little bit more direct in terms of you're not juggling 16 point system. Well, you
Yeah.
kind of are, because there's also job points, but they're very specifically delineated in the menus. But man, imagine getting points for your job.
So you're in a cave. Looking around.
Dungeons.
Sweet. So with this study foe skill, I get to learn one weakness every time I enter battle, basically.
Yeah, it's really helpful, especially for some of the end game stuff they've added. They want you to, one of the achievements suggests you go around and get every weakness for every enemy. I don't know how you do that without Cyrus.
Yeah.
Like,
so do you are you eventually able to recruit everyone, or is it not that way?
no, you get everybody. You can just swap them in and out. And like I said, with the secondary jobs, you can recruit everybody and then, you know, have all 8 jobs present in your party, so should you so desire, essentially.
Okay.
It's just you can't have all 8 people on the field at once. And honestly, I wouldn't want that. It'd be too much for my brain to handle.
Oh yeah.
I know the mobile game actually does put 8 people on the field, and oh my god, I can't imagine why they did that in a mobile game.
Exciting.
Hooray!
Yeah, I finally saved. So something that I think is I struggle with JRPGs, and this is just me opining, but the systems of JRPGs are often so hard to communicate to the player, because there's so many, right? There's like even just the basic battle mechanics. There's like weaknesses, and then there's HP and SP, and like I think this one's a little simpler than some other ones, but I always find it interesting in these beginning levels that how like the tutorials is such a necessary thing in JRPGs, more so than in other games. And I wonder how you feel like this game like taught you how to play Janelle, since you're kind of a newer player to it too.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think a lot of it, well, in part it's the way that I made it sort of do something, because as soon as the world opened up, I was less interested in the immediate narrative and more in learning about the space of the world and the sort of broader environment. So one of the ways that I learned is that going into a cave prematurely will not necessarily be deadly, but it will be very dangerous. So I stumbled into like a level 15 cave when I was significantly lower than that, and it took me quite a while to get out of there. So it teaches you that way, and that's one of the, so it gave me a sense of caution. It did warn me. It did say level higher than you, and I said, well, okay, I'll try it anyway. So it did give me a warning, and it does sort of do that. There are certainly the inner titles, and it's like, do this with your points, or like to use your ability or whatever, like the sort of basic directives of the game. But in terms of how it was teaching me to play it, it was more build a story about a specific place by talking to the people. That seems to be one of the first things that it teaches you, is talk to everyone. Everyone will have something useful to say.
And
that kind of harkens. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, because we were talking about the battle system, and I feel like this is definitely apparent in JRPGs, but there's so much of like people telling other people, oh goodness, how to play the game. Right, so I was playing Final Fantasy IV with a friend like last winter, and it was the same thing where it's like the game didn't tell me everything. So then my friend had to come in and say like, hey, in this situation you should do this, and make sure you pay attention to this and this and this. And I wonder then like the conversations that are happening while you play the game, and like the transferal of knowledge of like, I only know this because I have played it before.
So,
I think that's there for everything, right? But
that's a really, really interesting question, David. I think it leads to a broader question right now. I am not at all an anthropologist of Japan or a scholar of Japan. There's some interesting work there. There's interesting work on Korea nearby. But the kinds of questions it leads me to think are the broader questions behind that are, when games are designed with, a particular national cultural context in mind, to what extent does that shape the structure of the game? For example, what you're talking about, which is how many resources have been put into the game communicating its actual mechanics to players, right? Like if in a if you're designing a game for context and you know that your players are engaged in a lot of lateral sharing of information with each other, you're less likely to build that into the game. Those cultural conventions are resting on the resource of people sharing information. And it seems to me, I don't know, it's a generalization, but hypothesis, I guess, in the American context, even over the last 20, 30 years, gaming has been particularly isolated, right? Whereas, at least in the South Korean context, I can't so much speak to the Japanese context, that's not true because people tend to leave their homes in order to have the chance to play computer games. They're playing them in places where a lot of other players are around them, even when they're playing single-player games, right? With like the Bang cafes in Korea. Anyway, I just think it's interesting, broader question.
Definitely.
I just really think like the this is how you play it, or the communal aspect of single-player games is important. Because like we have in my Final Fantasy group, there are people who are playing there are people who share in similar interests in single-player games.
Yeah, Morgan, can you get a little closer to your mic?
Sorry, here, let me talk to my mic. Is that better?
Not really.
All right, let me turn off my mic. All right, I could try.
That's better.
What are we talking about? Single-player games and the communal aspect of single-player games. It's because like there's people who ask questions of people who've played the game before, like my friend asking like, oh, how do I do this specific, like, should I be expecting this from Octopath Traveler, or people getting stuck in specific spots in single-player games and be like, do I just need to grind or do I need to do this? As well as like the min-maxing aspect of, oh, you need to put this unit with that unit, or you need to put that unit into this specific job quest because then they'll be better with their stats and things, and that's what you should do. Definitely, there's that min-maxing aspect of why did you put Sky as a Mirrodin? He should be this, or Felix as a Mirrodin and that kind of stuff. So there's always that kind of communal aspect of figuring out what the best options are for certain characters.
Yeah, I think the job system really ignites that in this game, especially because you have to make the decision. Like, can every job work with every other job? Well, sure, but that doesn't mean that you're gonna get the best return on investment. You know, like what's really gonna work well with Thief is not necessarily what's really gonna work well with Warrior, right? I mean, you can do it. And you probably want to get the like passive skills leveled up, so you can go, okay, well, I have all these passive skills on the characters that need them, but otherwise, again, really, you don't want to be running around with. I'm trying to think of like what the worst combo in the game would be. They're all viable. It's just their degrees of viable. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. And so people are like, you can play whatever you want, but this way's better. I get that a lot from people. It's like, well, that's great that you're doing it that way, but if you want it to be easier, you could do it this way. It's like, well, I don't want to do it that way, so screw you.
That's kind of like, and that's the thing is like, I feel like sometimes when you sit down and watch somebody play a game, or you play a game and you see a seasoned player, or you're a seasoned player and you're seeing a younger player make choices, you're like, why would you make those choices? Like, what am I doing? And for full context, David, it's the thing that's bringing this to me to this is that I'm watching you play and I'm going, why isn't he going for 4 pip boosts?
I don't know what that is.
So those little the BP on the top, battle points or whatever, or boost points. Sorry, boost points. You can stack up to 4 of those, not 3. So you can, you're not unleashing the full power of your boost attacks. And I just went, I guess David wants to do more smaller attacks, and I should keep my mouth shut. And I was going to until it was relevant to the conversation, and now it's an interesting thing to bring up. I think that sometimes, when you're watching your younger brother, especially, this was something I had with my sister when I was really young. We'll play an RPG that you've already played through. You're like, why would you? Oh my God, you can't do that, and you're a kid, so it all just comes out,
Yeah.
See, and I didn't pay attention enough to the tutorial that told me I can stack those. So I just assumed that I couldn't.
Yeah, they have anime one-liners when they get up to full power. It's great.
It's really funny.
Therion says, "I'm ready. Are you?" Like,
God, of
Jesus
course
Christ, man.
That
Of
also,
course it is.
Calm down.
so like then on Twitch, right? We are streaming on Twitch. So I'm thinking, so there's like this popular Pokemon Twitch guy who does these special kinds of challenges with games, and there's a lot of that kind of conversation going on in the chat where somebody's like, well, this is like the min-max role for this, right? And you know, they're kind of like doing like the guidance, like helping the person figure out which Pokemon to use and which one to sacrifice when and whatever.
Oh yeah, for like Nuzlocke and stuff.
Yeah, and so it's like I wonder how like the Twitch. I'm writing for one of my other classes about Twitch, about podcasts on Twitch, and like the growth of that and how that relates to like remediation stuff. But I also wonder then like how Twitch also like replicates some of that like in-person conversation.
Yeah.
You know, or over voice chat conversation where you're like, oh, I'm playing this game and I don't know what to do. It's got me thinking about that too.
See you later, everybody. I gotta run.
Bye.
Thanks for
coming.
stopping by.
Oops, I just attacked with the wrong.
Oh, feels bad. At least you still have SP.
Yes.
I definitely think like watching YouTubers who are playing like survival games in particular. Like I watched before I bought Raft. I watched, you know, 4 content creators play Raft together, and every now and again they'd be like, we're all streaming it on Twitch, and so they'd be like, okay, chat, what do I do with the goat?
Mm-hmm.
The Twitch chat would be like, oh, here's what you do with the goat, or like they'll be like, oh, like my chat said this, my chat said that, and these guys have been streaming for. I think one of them, like Nyan, like when Twitch started, he's been streaming since then.
When
so
it was
he's
Justin TV.
No, it was Jacksepticeye, another Irish person, and Call Me Kevin playing Raft.
Oh no! I was saying like back when Twitch
Oh,
was
yeah.
Justin TV.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
I don't know.
God.
He just, and they just were like really used to it being like, oh, the chat knows, because you know their chats have 200 to 500 people, and one of those people is bound to know what to do with the goat. So.
It's crowdsourcing, right?
It's crowdsourcing. And I think that's a good. The good of it. The bad of it, I watched a guy on YouTube play a Nuzlocke challenge, and he just had fun. Like he captured what he wanted, and you know, he had people who died, and he made wrong moves, and he was just having fun. And at the end of the series, I haven't watched it, but at the end of the series, he's like reacting to a guy reviewing my Nuzlocke. I'm like, who reviews a Nuzlocke? It's just for fun, man. Like I don't understand.
But
Yeah, exactly.
it's the whole YouTube thing, right? Reviews, reaction videos to apology videos to mukbang videos, you know?
Yeah. It's like.
I apologize for ever filming a mukbang. No, I have not filmed a mukbang. Please, that's a joke. I swear.
Mukbangs are weird.
But
You know,
but it
some
does
people like
kind of point to like these these subgenres that feed into subgenres.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like some people get really into nitpicking other people's playstyles. And it can be, I don't know. That's why I'm always scared to like do stuff in front of people who know. Like I don't heal in front of my best friend because she's a fantastic healer, and I feel like she'd just be like, "You're doing it wrong." Be like, "I know. I'll just let you heal." Just let you heal. I don't want to get judged.
And
she's a fantastic person.
You're the eternal younger sibling.
Yeah, for healing at least. But yeah, it's like I'm just gonna let you do it. But yeah.
Yeah, it's this constant need to like temper your expectations, where it's like you have to let somebody just play the game, you know? If somebody's leaning over your shoulder, always telling you the right way to play, then like, what is that? At that point, that just becomes a hostile environment,
Right.
I think my rule, like outside of places where like here it made sense in the conversation to bring this up, is if the player asks for help, then I will give it. If not, I will sit back and let them do what they want to do. And this isn't a game necessarily where you need help. Like, are there little tricks? Absolutely. Like, one of the things that you pick up pretty quickly is there are design paradigms around how the enemies are drawn. And if you're paying attention to them, you can, with a relative margin of success, determine what elemental weaknesses those enemies are likely to have.
Right.
Without using Cyrus. Now, that doesn't help you for the achievement because you have to unlock all of them visibly on the screen. But like, if you're sitting there and going, "Fuck, I can't scan this," Cyrus isn't in my party, and I want to make sure I maximize my attack. You're going, okay, well, maybe I should hit them with, X, Y, Z. And a new player isn't going to have that, but it is, or no to ask for that necessarily. But wouldn't it suck if somebody leaned over your shoulder and was sitting there going, "Hey, by the way, that's got an ice weakness," and like, I think the thing that reminds me of the most is the really cringy GDQ run where the guy's on the couch and I can't remember what he's saying, but they're playing like a Legend of Zelda game and he keeps saying shit on the couch and to the point where the speedrunner turns around and just says, "Can you please stop talking?"
Ooh. Don't be that guy. Don't need to.
I've been that person for so many times, and I need to not be that way. When my boyfriend and I play games, I sometimes accidentally do that. So I've been on both sides.
If I'm playing like a game, like I got into this. One of my friends was playing Sky Factory, which is a Minecraft mod that is obtuse for a reason. Like to smelt ingots, you have to make a foundry to smelt ingots. Like you have to it's they made it purposely obtuse. And so he's like, "Well, how do I sift dirt?" And I'm like, "Well, let me look at your sieve." "Well, that's the wrong sieve. You got to make a different sieve." He's like, "Why?" And I'm like, "I don't know. That's just how the game works." And so every now and again, I'd be like, "Hey, you died. You fell off the world, but I think there's a grave in Sky Factory 3, so you can go down there and get the grave." So I was giving some unsolicited advice. But if he seemed like he was okay with it because he's never played Sky Factory before. But I was playing Satisfactory with my friend who plays it a lot and has like a really long save file, and he's just doing stuff, and I'm like, "Iggy, what are you doing?" He's like, "Well, I'm doing this." It's like, "That's great, Iggy. How are you doing that? And why are you doing that?" And he's like, "Well, I don't know." I'm like, I need to know because I at some point want to do Satisfactory by myself, and I need to know these things. Like, please teach me how to play Satisfactory instead of just playing Satisfactory while I'm hanging out next to you.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is this a boss?
Gonna fight the boss?
I'm gonna fight the boss, and then we're gonna call it a stream once I'm done with this.
We're not gonna get to the joke.
We're not gonna get to the joke.
We're not gonna get to the joke. I won't spoil a joke on stream. Oh. It's the best fucking thing in the whole game. Oh my god. I literally kept laughing about it for like 30 hours. It's a 30-hour good joke if you keep making permutations of it. Also, who the fuck builds a fireplace, like a stone fireplace, in a cave?
Well,
that's the asset they made.
Yeah.
They're gonna use.
I like how my investigation was like, there was one person who said he has a gambling addiction. That's probably the bad guy.
But of course. Now I can make that joke around people and they'll understand it in serious play. One of Cyrus's like repeating lines is just to go, "But of course." So good. Like, it's so bad, but it's so good. God, I also need to drag up that old fan comic somebody did of their playthrough, just because it highlights in so many ways the potential for connection between these characters. And I think there is something to like take a fan studies lens too when it comes to like how fans fill in the gaps when an RPG doesn't have a lot of crosstalk among characters. They create like imaginary worlds of dialogue, and that dialogue sometimes is more entertaining than the actual shit in the game.
Yeah.
Oh man, yeah. Whew.
Oof.
This is gonna be a rough fight.
Am I not?
Why is he so big?
You have everything you need to beat this. They would not give you an enemy that you couldn't break.
Oh yeah.
For the first area. But you're going to be taking a lot of damage, and you're playing Cyrus, so that means you don't have a ton of sustain compared to other characters. Yeah. So this is just a rough starting fight.
It is okay. I think I might have an idea of what I'm doing. Potentially.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Probably.
Imagine not having sustain. This post brought to you by Therion Gang.
Just be like to do and just be a fucking beast.
Okay. Russell's muttering an incantation. Time to eat a healing grape. I should have bought more of them. Oh well.
Go, Russell, could you hold on for a second? I want to have lunch.
I like how a healing grape gives me 500 health. I thought it would give me like 50.
It's a good grape.
That's a really
We're
good
in season
Very
right now.
good grape.
That's how Wisconsin produce works, right? There's actually an in-season.
Yeah, there is.
There is in seasons. Like strawberries are coming into seasons. Highly recommend getting strawberries.
Virginia produce is not the same way. I was very impressed by the produce. This is not at all about the game, but hey guys, here's Ren talks about produce for some reason.
Strawberries are getting into season. Highly recommend getting you some strawberries.
Nice,
Yay! I broke them all.
Nice. It's less damage you're taking. Yeah, I mean, like, I also love the purple mist attacks in this game. I think they communicate in a really, like, it is functionally the exact same thing as the JoJo character approaches with the menacing text on them, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, oh no, that guy, not only does he mean business, he's gonna hit me real hard, and like, God, it's just chef's kiss. Really good way of handling these things. I mean, it really like I know everything comes back to the guide the player kind of paradigms that come out of something like Super Mario, right? Where it's like, follow the coins, or
follow the enemies.
Yeah.
For most FPSs is, I don't know where I'm going. Find some enemies, go from there. Yeah.
Sonic the Hedgehog is the same way. Move generally to the right side of the screen, follow wherever the enemies pop up, I'm trying to think of other games that do a really good job of guiding their player in that particular way, that are older. I mean, really, that's a pretty, not an exhaustive list, but a good list.
Yeah.
This game, in a different way, accomplishes, I feel like, those same kind of things, but it's all through, like, static visuals as opposed to how do I progress forward. The progression forward is so tutorialized that, like, that's not a question, I don't think. Also, you guys are just going back and forth now. You're smacking him with your cane, and he hits you with a book sometimes.
Yep.
Is this, I mean, I can't help but read this as an insult to Scholar. Is that what we are? Do we just beat people with canes and smack people with books, and that's that?
I mean, have you seen the Scholar auto attack in Final Fantasy? It quite literally is bashing someone with a book. That's what they do. They just bash. Whack.
I don't think I'm gonna survive this next wave of attacks because I did not buy enough grapes.
Do you have a okay? Jeez, that's rough.
My bad.
GG.
Okay, I broke him again.
Nice, he's critical, so you just need to hit him with a big attack. Do you want a suggestion or do you want to do it?
I think I know what I'm gonna do. I have a plan.
Okay.
I have a plan.
Okay, I'm done. I'm done for. I died. Oh, well.
Yeah, I was going to say you have a light soul stone in your inventory, and that would have been a good thing to hit if you broke him with,
Gotcha. Well, unfortunately, stream will not be able to see me beat this guy, but that's okay. Thank you for joining, everyone. And we will see you tomorrow. The next stream is mine. Tomorrow at 4 p.m. Central, I'll be doing some Majora's Mask. I'll see you then.
More Octopath is always good, too. So maybe one day we will stream Octopath again for a third time.
All right,
The
see y'all
lump sum
later.
favorite.